One thing that I for sure think that MUN helped me in just life in college is reading very like informational and technically dense texts and papers, and conducting preliminary research with that and looking at government sources, knowing where to look for the sources that you need, and really collecting this information that you're going to present or use in research.
Welcome to MUN Deep Dive. This is episode 7. Today, our guest is Youhyun Noh. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Yuhyun. I was a student at KSJ. I was Mr. Harris's student. Right now, I study neuroscience and communication science and technology at Vanderbilt University, Nashville, Tennessee. And I was involved in MUN throughout my entire high school career. So I'm here to talk about that. Super excited. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And let's just jump right into it. So, how has MUN impacted your life?
Yeah, when I think of my high school life, I think the keyword that I usually bring up is leadership. It was a lot of like leadership and a lot of community involvement, a lot of teamwork, and MUN was really at the center of all that. Maybe with like um, student council, but mostly MUN. And MUN was a really, really defining factor for my style in leadership and how I interact with people because, like being in a room with so many smart and like well-spoken individuals, that's not a very like a common experience, especially as a high schooler. And everything is student-led, everything, a discussion, preparation to everything. It's just we're doing it, and they're really, really smart. Everyone's so smart. So it really made me constantly remind myself that everyone is just as, if not more, competent than I am. And it helped me put myself lower than the other students and always stay humble in any kind of setting, which often really yielded great results. MUN has also helped me a lot in public speaking, being confident in like a discussion environment, um, or like when I'm just like having a conversation with other people.
You mentioned public speaking earlier, and so I've watched you, right, throughout high school and even a little bit before that, really carry yourself strongly, confidently in front of, a student body of 500 or, we'd have a conference of 300. How did you get to that position where you felt so much confidence? Because the reality was, I did 10 years, right? Even in year 10, I was still, I looked, I think, more nervous than you at times when we were in front of a group of 500. So, how did you build up kind of that resilience as well as that ability to speak in front of so many people with confidence?
I don't know. Well, I wasn't always like this, I think. And in college, it's weird because I rarely do public speaking now because most of my things in college is studying for exams, reading papers, doing experiments, running experiments in my lab. So that's like a thing that I miss so much about high school because I was always in front of everyone speaking, um, giving announcements, doing things like that, giving presentations. I really, really enjoyed that. And how I got to that point was I think I just liked getting attention from a group of people. That's the first thing. And it's always a matter of how much you're prepared to speak what you want to speak to these people. And I was always tailoring whatever my speech was to the audience, to the specific audience, whether that be a group of students, a group of teachers, parents, or my MUN team, or other chairs and delegates. Um, Preparation is like the key thing. It was the level of how much I was prepared for that speech always matched how confident I was delivering that speech. And writing the speech is something that I really, really enjoy. It's just like fun to write things and imagine myself speaking these words in front of 100 people. Um, but yeah, I think that's the main point.
When it comes to, and we've actually had this conversation years ago, I don't know if you remember this. You were a senior student over 2 years ago, and if I'm not mistaken, you've were born and raised in South Korea.
Hmm.
And I remember the first time we met, every once in a while we'd have students, right, who have lived in the States a long time and have, made it to Korea, to be part of our school. And there was a level of sort of confidence as well as, I don't know if it's represented accurately in this conversation right now, but kind of a confidence with the English language. And I remember always telling you how I always found that very impressive because there's people in my life, growing up, half Japanese, full Japanese, maybe Japanese, lived in America 4 or 5 years, and there's a variety of levels, but your English was always just so fluent and confident, and the vocabulary was very, very comprehensive. And so, was there a trick to get to that level so quickly, despite never living in the United States?
Yeah. Well, to correct that, I did live in the States for a year when I was young. It was in San Antonio, Texas. That's where I got like my pronunciation, I think.
Mm.
But in terms of speech, I think my trick was I loved watching other people speak in front of others when they were good at it. So like my algorithm, my YouTube algorithm would be like graduation speeches or like people giving talks at a TED Talk, or giving like some kind of speech at a conference, like famous actors or things like that. And I would just watch them in awe. Like, how do they speak like that? And whenever they spoke certain phrases or certain vocabulary or in a certain accent that was really effective in speech, because there are certain skills, right? Like how you make a pause or how you raise your voice at certain sentences, things like that. I think I made a mental note of it. I was just really into watching speeches. That was how I spent my free time. I like enjoyed it. And then I think I learned how to mimic that. Everything is about mimicking people that you admire. That's how you learn, and that's how you get to the point of building your own style in speech. I do have my own style in speech, you probably know, but that all came from watching other people do it.
Mm. That's interesting. And I mean, earlier you mentioned kind of how your life in high school was a lot more in public, right? You were kind of the face of the school, right? Part of the student council. And now in college, a bit more kind of, I don't know if introverted is the right word, but smaller groups, a lot of research. There must have been a set of skill sets that you really utilized though in MUN that you still utilize now. So how do you see that transition, even if it's not just, giving speeches in front of hundreds of people?
Yeah. Speech is not all that MUN is about. One thing that I for sure think that MUN helped me in just life in college is reading very like informational and technically dense texts and papers, and conducting preliminary research with that and looking at government sources, knowing where to look for the sources that you need, and really collecting this information that you're going to present or use in research. Um, I think that is not a typical experience that high schoolers can get, or even just like beyond high school. Learning how to use your sources and learning how to look for sources, the right sources. It's such an important skill in college. Like, you need to know that. You can't do anything here without that. So I got a little bit of a head start, and there are classes that teach you how to do it. Like, like professors in STEM or professors in research spend at least one or two classes teaching their students how to look for the right sources and how to read through it and how to make sense with it. And that's something that I really appreciated about MUN. And as I mentioned, like being comfortable and confident in a discussion setting that's formal and informal at times, and also being okay with disagreement and learning to appreciate the power of different opposing perspectives. Because in an MUN setting, you would find it very common that someone would disagree with you, someone would point out that what you're saying is wrong, and that there's actually this part of the story that you probably didn't mention in your speech, or really, like, if you're in a crisis committee, like, criticize what you're saying like adamantly. And that's the fun of it. But being okay with that, being able to take that and really incorporate that into your own argument later on is what's fun and what's useful.
Earlier, you were talking about finding sources. So kind of like at the very surface level, like high school, we're talking, JSTOR, Google Scholar. Can you kind of extrapolate on like what do you mean? What's sort of like that next stage of where like college students are at?
So I don't know, because now the research papers that I read are very focused on molecular biology and neuroscience, but so I can only speak on behalf of that field. But in terms of neuroscience, the research paper that I read for my research lab and for my classes is very experiment focused. So they go through the methods, they state where all these compounds and all these devices were taken from. It's very hard to understand. They use a lot of acronyms for enzymes and different drugs or different pathways or mechanisms. So you need to have a background information on that. So being able to complement that reading content with additional research and additional learning on your own is important, and also knowing where to find the good stuff, the important stuff of that paper, because it's so long and it's so hard to understand everything. But once you get the hang of like reading papers and knowing the structure and this is where you find the good stuff, that's important. And also taking what's important from that research paper into your own research or your own paper, incorporating the right evidence and right data analysis. Data analysis is also a good part because this is the hardest part for me, reading graphs that are very just look like just shapes and figures and making sense of that, because they don't often like describe it in like, I don't know, like easy words. They use all these technical jargons, and you need to know, and you need to know what to look at in these graphs and figures. So that's where we're at, or what we're trying to get at least.
Interesting. And I think another question I have to connect to that is like AI, right? It's just everyone's talking about it, especially in educational spaces. I feel like you would have that insider view, right? And this it still happens to me as a teacher, right? Where there'll be some source that has past IB papers that like every student seems to know about and none of the teachers know about. So that's why I always say I often ask the students, say, hey, tell me what you know so that we can get that information. So as a college student, kind of playing at some of these highest levels, right, when it comes to academia, where you're at as a junior, right, at a very prestigious university. Like what does that whole AI scene look like? Like what are people using? What are their mistakes? Are professors, on them? Like what is that whole ecosystem like right now?
Yeah. I have a philosophy of not using AI when I'm writing,
Mm,
um, because I don't like the way ChatGPT writes. It's very easy to tell. I've seen other people write it, like, because when I'm reviewing applications for certain things,
mm,
I've seen them, and it's like easy to catch
mm,
um, whether they're using AI or not. But how I use it is it's a really convenient tool to use when you're organizing your ideas or organizing your sources. I don't use ChatGPT that much, but I do use Gemini and Google Gemini. And I use the other application or the website named Notebook.
yeah.
It's like where you can compile all these sources and like really just into a notebook. So you can make different notebooks. And then in the notebook, there's like three like sections. And the one section, you can upload all your files that are relevant to that specific topic or subject. And then it will make you like a study guide or an overview over like an audio podcast of it. And then you can ask some things or write something in the middle section. And it's important, it's useful for studying for my exam. So what I do is I upload all my presentation slides from my biochemistry course, and I just upload it there, and then ask for it to make a mind map for me, because it's not often like useful to take notes on presentation slides. It's like it's just too lengthy, too
Mm,
much details that I don't have enough time for. So it saves me a lot of time in that way. And for my other classes where I have to do like some research, that's why I compile all my research and I add my own notes to it. And then I ask it to like organize it in an order or a sense that makes sense for my argument. So if I'm using these and these sources for my first body paragraph, I'm organized it in like certain order, or like bring out some quotes and evidence that are useful for my argument here. So that is really useful. It saves you a lot of time, and you're still in control.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome way to go. I mean, is Notebook LLM or LM, is that the one that makes podcasts of the PDFs that you drop?
Yeah, it makes you like an audio um, podcast almost of whatever the content is. So people have used this to like whenever they're jogging or whenever they're working out, whenever they're walking to class, to just listen to the content and study that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's some serious
That's,
optimization, right?
um, yeah.
Wow. Well, I want to circle back to MUN kind of as
Mhm.
we get towards the end of this conversation. And this is actually a specific one. I haven't asked people yet, but you are the youngest guest so far. So I think at least your memories will be best when it comes to MUN. If you could go back to your first ever MUN conference, what would you tell your younger self?
Um, my first MUN conference was actually the one that I had the most fun in. It was a crisis committee. Of course, it was crisis committee. I love crisis committees. It was a on the Cold War, specifically about the crisis of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I remember that. It's actually the one that I remember the most vividly because it was such an impressive, lasting like moment for me. That was what got me into MUN and what motivated me to do other MUN conferences on my own. But I was super prepared because I was anxious. Like I was anxious that there were going to be people better than me in MUN, and I needed to do good. I wanted like some kind of award. So I remember spending like days and nights doing research and writing up my speech, and really just going through it all. But I remember this one person, he was a senior at our school, from our school actually, in the room, that was so prepared and so like smart and intelligent, but on top of everything, like so confident in whatever he said. Like from his opening speech, he sort of seized the whole room, and ended up leading both sides of the committee. And he was like really the center of all our discussions. Everything that we said, we kind of went back to whatever he said. And I was just so impressed. So impressed, so jealous. He got best delegate for like obviously. But I remember that, and what I would tell myself, or what I've been telling myself in future conferences or future MUN, is to be confident and to like genuinely believe whatever you say,
Mm.
whether or not it's 100% accurate or not.
Um, but yeah, I think a fun way to end this would be, you still have ways to go for your academic as well as professional career, right? So, where do you envision yourself 5 years, 10 years from now?
That's a difficult question. Wow. So right now, the ideal path that I'm designing or envisioning for myself is to just keep doing research and keep learning about the brain. Right now, I work at a lab. I work at two labs actually. One of them is a neuropharmacology lab. It's like called the Warren Center for Neuroscience Drug Discovery at Vanderbilt University Medical School, medical center. What we do is we study a specific type of receptor in the brain called metabotropic glutamate receptors. It's like it has 8 subtypes. We can go on and on about that, but all of the team studies that specific receptor and how it leads to other diseases. But it's pharmacology based, so we test drugs and we use a lot of molecular pharmacology techniques in lab. So it has taught me a lot about this, like the technical stuff. And in my other lab, which I'm just getting started on, we do it's like a multi-sensory lab. So we study vision, and how these different vision and motion and just touch or like audio, and we study the intersection of these sensory mechanisms and how they work in, like together for a certain goal, and how it's different in, for example, patients with autism or patients with ADHD. So that's like a very behavioral, computational side of research. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to really broaden my experience in the field of neuroscience research because there's so many things going on. There's AI, there's like drugs, there's diseases, there's clinical stuff. And my goal for my undergrad career, for the rest of my undergrad career, is to just familiarize myself with how diverse this field is. And after grad, I'm going to go to grad school, graduate school,
Mm.
potentially a PhD, and just deepen my research in a specific field. Because what happens is that undergrad, you can like get a taste of all these different things, but once you go into graduate school, you have to choose one. It
Mm.
just gets narrower and narrower and narrower the deeper you get into education. So that's a little daunting, but also exciting because you'll become that much of an expert in that field. So in 5 years, I'll probably still be in my PhD program, but in 10 years, maybe I'll be in like a research assistant at like other institutions or be in the industry working for a pharmaceutical company or a biotechnology company doing their research. Um, or I don't know, I could be back home with my parents, not knowing what to do, just hanging out with my dog. Um, but there's a lot of opportunities available, and that's exciting.
Yeah, it's for me, it's always exciting to see someone who pursues something that they have loved from high school. To just, it's been a linear projection for you. And of course, some people change, right, what they love, and that's fine too. But yeah, it's been incredible from afar to kind of see you continue to pursue your interests in the brain, which you always talked about. And yeah, that concludes episode 7. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me.